Hey guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. This week I'm going to show you how to make these. Right, so I wanted some new black sneakers and I bought these Air Force Ones because they're classics and they're fairly cheap compared to other sneakers, but they are a little bit boring. I don't know what I expected from all black sneakers, to be honest. They're just all black, but I've decided to DIY these, so welcome to this DIY video. So the first thing I wanted to do was to spice up the swooshes a little bit, and this step is heavily inspired by the Off-White Air Force Ones and a video by Who is Jacob in which he tries to DIY the Off-White Air Force Ones. So thank you Jacob for giving me this idea, and go check out his video if you want to. So to be able to mess with the swooshes, first things first, I've got to remove them from the shoe, and that's what I'm doing right here. You should be using a seam ripper for this. I don't own a seam ripper, that's why I'm using a cutter. This works as well, but you have to be really careful. Just cut along the seams, and when you reach the end, just cut the swoosh off. Try and do this very neatly because leather is not that forgiving. When you've successfully removed the swoosh, try and clean it up a little bit. Remove all the leftover pieces of thread, and obviously do that for all 4 swooshes. So when you're done, you're just going to use your sewing machine and zigzag stitch all around the edges of the swoosh. I'm using white thread here because I want the shoes to be black and white. This step can be a little bit difficult because the leather is fairly thick and my sewing machine didn't handle it too well, but I'm just glad it didn't break. So I would advise you to sew very carefully and very slowly. Now it's time to glue the swooshes back onto the shoe. I'm using this special glue that's meant for gluing leather, but you can use hot glue or super glue or whatever, it will work just as fine. So I'm just adding some glue onto the back of the swoosh, making sure that all the excess thread is glued to the back of the swoosh, and I'm just spreading it with my finger because I am a professional. No, seriously, use a toothpick or whatever to spread the glue. Your finger is not the best idea. Anyways, I'm also spreading some glue on the shoe itself with my finger, and this glue requires to dry for 20 minutes before you can put the pieces together. So
20 minutes later,
I'm putting the pieces together, and I'm doing this very carefully because you have to put the pieces in the exact same spot where they were before, or else you're going to see the holes of the seams that were there before. Right, next step is to add some detail. For that, I'm using a sewing awl, also known as a speedy stitcher, and some white embroidery thread. I'm just using small pieces of thread, and I'm just adding these white little details. I don't know what to call them, but I really want to show you how to use a sewing awl. It's a little bit different in this shot and you can't really see it that well, but I'm going to use it later in the video again, and then you'll be able to see how this magical speedy stitcher works. But for those of you who already know how a sewing awl works, I'm basically just stitching back and forth once, then bringing the thread to the inside of the shoe and tying a knot, and this gives me this little short stitch. I'm doing this on 4 different spots on the swoosh, and I'm obviously doing it for all 4 swooshes. After that, I'm cleaning up a little bit, removing all the excess thread and making it look nice and neat. Right, next I'm using some snap buckles, some straps, and my speedy stitcher again. I want the snap buckle to be right there on the shoe, so that's how I'm measuring how much strap I'm going to need. I'm cutting the strap to the desired length and then flaming the edges so they won't fray. I'm pulling the straps through the snap buckle, folding the end over to make it look nice and neat, and then pinning it in place with the safety pin. Now I'm sewing everything together with my speedy stitcher. And sewing with the sewing awl isn't as complicated as you might think. Here I'm sewing from right to left. So I'm poking my sewing awl through my fabric, taking the right side of the thread and pulling it through the right loop. The speedy stitcher creates it on the back of the fabric. Then I'm pulling the needle back through the fabric, and I'm just repeating that process. Again, poke the sewing awl through the fabric, take the right end of the thread that's now on the back of the fabric and pull it through the right loop that the speedy stitcher created, and pull the needle back out. So I'm just continuing sewing like that, also sewing the other strap to the other part of the snap buckle, and then sewing this whole contraption to the side of the shoe. This step is by far the most difficult one, and also you can't really see what I'm doing that well because I'm obviously doing it inside of the shoe, but I'm basically sewing this the same way as I did in the step before. Just take your time with this one and make sure the snap buckle is exactly where you want it to be because you can't change its position afterwards. After I'm done sewing both sides on, I'm just cutting off the excess strap and flaming the edges so they won't fray. So that's how the shoes are looking so far. Let's get on to the last step and give this puppy some new shoelaces. For that, I'm using these white round elastic shoelaces and these cord stoppers and obviously the shoes. So I'm pulling both ends of the shoelace through the holes in the cord stopper, making sure that they're equal in length. Then I'm basically lacing the shoes the wrong way around, starting at the top and working my way down, again making sure everything is symmetrical. And when I get to the last hole, I'm tying a little knot that I can hide on the inside of the shoe, and basically I'm done. So let's see how these custom Air Force Ones turn out. I'm honestly really happy with how these turned out. I expected sewing with the sewing oil to be much more difficult than it was. I also expected to run into problems, but I clearly didn't. I would classify this as an intermediate DIY, so if you want to try this at home, go ahead and make yourself some custom sneakers. But that's all I have for you for this week. I hope you've enjoyed this little inspiration on how you could DIY your shoes, potentially. I don't know, this isn't supposed to be a guide. You should be following step by step. This is more like inspiration I'm throwing out there, and you could use whatever you want. I mean, if you want to do it the exact same way I did it, go ahead, but I don't know, it's supposed to be just inspiration, so go ahead and do whatever you like. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I hope I've inspired you. If I did so, why not give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to become part of the Dapper family. That's it from me for now, and I'll see you later. Bye!